Interest in homeschooling is increasing, especially in the time of COVID-19. The pandemic has raised security concerns amongst many parents, and homeschooling is starting to look like a more attractive option. Online learning has also presented a viable option for distance learning. However, a challenge where the digital divide and access is concerned. Yesterday, the Department of Education was set to have about 400,000 learners in inland schools, still unplaced. Optimi Home, which operates homeschooling provider Impaq, has noted that about 30,000 learners have been registered for homeschooling in the last 18 months. Impaq has recently launched a fully catered-for online school and is hiring a large number of qualified teachers specifically for online teaching roles. For more on this, we're joined by Louise Schoonwinkel, Managing Director at Optimi Home. Louise, very good morning to you. Thank you for your time. I mean, looking at where things stand with COVID-19 having a huge impact on perhaps the school options and modes of learning that parents have had to consider, homeschooling has seen a significant increase. Let's talk about some of perhaps the reasons why parents have come forward and opted to homeschool and some of the advantages.
Thank you, Impaq. Yeah, so we've definitely seen a massive uptake in homeschooling. Let's think back to pre-pandemic. Homeschooling was really a niche market. Most people didn't know how it worked, what it was about, and all of a sudden, March 2020, all kids were sent home and parents had to homeschool while working from home. Some of the schools went online and started using online tools, but a lot of schools didn't have that luxury. So they literally sent work home, and mom and dad had to pitch in and try become teachers in between other tasks at home. So what we've seen is there's multiple reasons why we think the uptake has been really big. But what we've seen is that families who would have never ever considered homeschooling in the past all of a sudden saw that it was a method that worked for them. And for some children, it really resulted into phenomenal progress. So these families decided to, even after schools reopened, to carry on homeschooling due to the results they saw in their child and the progress that they made. Then there are other families who really have family members with comorbidities, and they didn't feel it was safe to send their children back to school. So these families also opted to carry on with homeschooling, and having done it now for 18 months, it's actually working and they're deciding to carry on. What we've also seen happening was online learning was something that the market was really skeptical about and really reluctant to try. And what the COVID pandemic did, and this is not only in education, but all of a sudden, all of us had to do everything online. People who never did online shopping, for example, had to start doing online shopping. So the same with education. All of a sudden, all of us were sitting in online meetings and the same online classes for school, etc., etc. And people saw that it can actually work. So now the market became ready for online learning solutions, which it wasn't ready for pre-pandemic. And that's the growth that we're seeing now, that people are looking at different options where previously they wouldn't have looked at it. And they're actually seeing that it's working for them.
How then, Louise, did you manage to help parents and pupils with the shift? I mean, the shift from one-on-one interaction to now homeschooling and doing all of this online. Perhaps for some children, this may have also been a huge challenge because you don't have that one-on-one personal experience. It's more like being in a virtual classroom without that one-on-one interaction.
No, so first off, I think I'll just mention as well that children learn differently. So homeschooling and online learning remains niche, and it remains something that's suited towards certain children and a certain personality type. So you find your child that loves school, that loves a big classroom, that flourishes on the interaction in the class and the live interaction. And then you get your child who actually flourishes when it's one-on-one attention or when it's online attention. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend whose daughter was in grade 1 who was very shy, who never used to put up her hand in class. When it was online classes, she all of a sudden started interacting in the class. So it's different personality types as well. But what we did from an Impaq perspective, we didn't have an online school back in 2020. Our material is very much geared towards the parent and the learner. So the parent has a dummy's guide for teaching subjects that they could refer to, which helps them in teaching the subject. And then we also launched online lessons for everyone out there. So it wasn't only for our clients. We had weekly lessons in all subjects that anyone could dial into, where we had our teachers go through sections of the material just to assist the parents a little bit in that transition. And that was still a classroom, although a virtual classroom, it was still similar to what you would get at school.
Another concern that has been noted in the educational space, especially now exacerbated with the COVID-19 pandemic, as many as 750,000 children have dropped out of school. How then do you think that online learning could become a solution? And how accessible is it for perhaps poorer households and communities, especially trying to look at the access to online and the internet, and also the funds that may be needed for such a system?
And I think that's one of the sad things that the pandemic showed us. In education, it actually widened the gap, because your middle to high income family could afford to buy the tools and resources and go online. Also, those children attended schools that went online, where your children from a poorer community, the school didn't have the resources to go online, and they had to carry on at home, and they might not have had the resources at home either to do schooling online. It is, however, becoming more accessible, but a lot more needs to be done. And in our poorer communities especially, we would need to give support, because those families wouldn't be able to afford Wi-Fi connections. Schooling can't really be done from your smartphone, so you need a tablet or a laptop if you are doing it full-time. It's different watching a quick extra lesson, maths video on your smartphone, but to be full-time online, you actually need a proper device. So you need device support. You need trained teachers who can actually train these children. So there is a lot that needs to happen to make this accessible for everyone. But the beauty of this is that this is a barrier that we can overcome. And I think this is where government can actually assist in some form. Private practice can assist in some form. There's already a few companies who've given bursaries to children from disadvantaged communities to join online schools. But yes, it is not necessarily something a family who's wondering where their next meal is going to come from is not necessarily going to have, even if an online school costs between 1,500 and 2,000 Rand a month, they're not going to have that. So that's definitely where private practice will need to give some sponsorships, and perhaps government can also equip some of the public schools with the necessary resources, but certainly not a very quick fix to making it accessible to everyone.
Absolutely. Louise, before we let you go, another concern that would perhaps arise in the minds of parents is the vetting system. How do you vet which sort of online school to enroll with, or whether or not it's registered, and also trying to avoid being part of a bogus school, to spend 5 years only to find that the school was never registered and that your qualification doesn't mean much?
And before that happens, we get learners who pitch up and then they actually went to a school who's not registered. So I think with an online school, at the moment, I'll quickly just give a bit of legal background. So in South Africa, there are 3 exam bodies that you can do your matric through. It's the Department of Basic Education, so that's where all our public schools sit. It's the Independent Exam Board, or the IEB, where the private schools sit. And then there's the CAI, which is the Distance Learning Exam Body, where some of the private schools and all the distance learning providers sit. There's a few distance learning providers that sit under the IEB as well. So first of all, make sure that the institution you are with are registered with one of these 3 institutions, because that's an immediate warning light if they're not, because that means they are actually not registered and you can't do your matric through them. Because from grade 10 onwards, it's very important that you are registered with a provider that is registered with one of these organizations. So that would be the first point of call. And then I would also look at experience. There is a lot of online schools that popped up all over the market over the past 2 years. And I do think experience comes into play here, because the provider who's been through a grade 10 to 12 setting, who understands what the rules are, how it works, will be able to service you better. So I would definitely advise parents out there to go for a reputable provider who does have experience, who does have learners who's already qualified through them, just to make sure you don't go for a bogus school and you would have wasted a year and a lot of money.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Louise Schoonwinkel, Managing Director for Optimi Home, giving some sound advice on what to look out for should you want to enroll your child for an online schooling system.